It's Friday, November 1st, and this is the Daily Medical News, where we bring you the top headlines in clinical medicine and a closer look at the day's biggest story. I'm Nick Andrews.
And I'm Mary Ellen Schneider. Today, why the ideal pharmacological regimen for migraines remains a challenge.
How the costs compare for antidepressants and cognitive behavioral therapy for major depressive disorder.
What nutrition can tell you about mortality risks in older patients with peripheral artery disease.
And an FDA advisory panel gives its support to a birth control patch.
Plus, why evolution, not revolution, is what your patients can expect when it comes to drug price reforms. But first, help us make this podcast better. Take a moment to complete our short listener survey via the link in the show notes. And now, the news.
Picking pharmacologic treatment for migraines remains a challenge, despite numerous studies investigating efficacy, cost-benefit analyses, and outcomes. That's the assessment from Dr. Carly Rodriguez, pharmacy director at health insurer Moda Health, who spoke at the annual meeting of the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy. Overall, generic drugs continue to dominate migraine drug therapy, with triptans leading the way. As for newer therapies, Dr. Rodriguez says the paucity of translatable evidence makes comparing and evaluating those options, such as botulinum toxins and CGRP inhibitors, particularly difficult. Those two injectable drug classes are not first-line treatments for migraine and are reserved instead for patients refractory to at least one prophylactic treatment. Botulinum toxin A makes a good case because it costs less than a single ER visit, but Dr. Rodriguez cautions that there's not enough supporting data. And an Institute for Clinical and Economic Review report on CGRP inhibitors found that the therapy's cost may not produce viable clinical benefits. Dr. Rodriguez adds that both botulinum toxins and CGRP inhibitors require prior authorization, and their injectable dosage forms restrict the settings in which they are administered and dispensed.
Neither cognitive behavioral therapy nor second-generation antidepressant medications was more cost-effective than the other for treating patients with major depressive disorder. That's according to a study published in Annals of Internal Medicine. Researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston say the findings make shared decision-making based on patient preferences critical. Analyzing data from the STAR-D trial, the investigators calculated the cost and average quality-adjusted life years of both treatments at 1 year and 5 years. At 1 year, quality-adjusted survival in patients who received CBT increased by 3 days compared with medications, but CBT came at a higher mean cost to the healthcare sector and to society. At 5 years, CBT delivered an increase of 20 quality-adjusted life days compared with medications. But there was some uncertainty about CBT's cost-effectiveness when the researchers calculated its net monetary benefit for the healthcare sector and to society. Dr. Mark Senior of Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Toronto says that given the findings, both CBT and medications should be available to all patients with major depressive disorder.
The Geriatric Nutritional Risk Index independently predicted 5-year overall survival and major adverse cardiovascular and limb events in patients with peripheral artery disease. Dr. Yai Matsuo is at Kitakanto Cardiovascular Hospital in Shibukawa, Japan. She presented the findings from a study of more than 1,200 patients at the annual Congress for the European Society of Cardiology. The Geriatric Nutritional Risk Index score is based on a patient's height, serum albumin, and the ratio between ideal and actual body weight. Dr. Matsuo says the score is simple to calculate and a better predictor than BMI. 56% of the PAD patients had a risk score greater than 98, indicative of no increased risk of malnutrition and nutritional deficiencies. Their 5-year overall survival rate was 81%. Patients with a score of 92 to 98 saw their survival rate fall to 62%, while those with a score of less than 82 had a 23% survival rate. The MDH Daily Medical News will be right back after this.
An FDA advisory committee voted 14-1 that the benefits of an investigational contraceptive patch sufficiently outweigh the risks to warrant an approval recommendation. The patch, AG 215, contains ethanol estradiol and levonorgestrel. The treatment regimen involves application of a patch to the abdomen, buttocks, or upper torso. The patch is changed weekly for 3 weeks, followed by 1 week without a patch. Most of the Bone, Reproductive, and Urologic Drugs Advisory Committee members base their decisions on the need for more contraceptive options for patients. But most also expressed concerns about the patch's efficacy, and they suggested product labeling that calls attention to high rates of unintended pregnancies with the patch, as well as increased risk of venous thromboembolism in obese women.
And finally today, Congress is considering 2 separate comprehensive proposals to address the escalating cost of drug prices, but neither is expected to make it to the president's desk. The more likely scenario is that parts of those bills aimed at reforming the Medicare Part D prescription drug program could be added to a must-pass budget bill before the end of 2019. At least that's the prediction of Ross Margulies, senior associate in the Washington office of the law firm Foley Hoag. Mr. Margulies spoke at the annual meeting of the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy. A bill championed by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, H.R. 3, is considered dead on arrival in the Senate because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has stated that the upper chamber won't take it up. In the Senate, the Prescription Drug Pricing Reduction Act enjoys some bipartisan support, but Mr. Margulies questioned whether there was enough backing to actually pass the bill. Provisions in both bills have bipartisan support, however, and could ultimately be passed through other legislative vehicles. One proposal common to both bills is a cap on out-of-pocket spending by Part D beneficiaries. Mr. Margulies says that the lack of a cap has increasingly raised issues as more and more specialty drugs come onto the market, and thus push patients into the program's catastrophic phase. Another area garnering bipartisan support is reforming Medicare Part D's structure, which hasn't undergone major renovation since its creation. The redesign proposals in the 2 bills would fundamentally change how the catastrophic phase is covered. The out-of-pocket limits would eliminate beneficiary cost sharing in that phase and dramatically reduce the government's financial exposure. Currently, the federal government covers 80% of the cost of drugs for beneficiaries in catastrophic coverage, and the plan sponsors cover the remaining 15%. The House and Senate plans both reduce government coverage to 20% and shift more cost responsibility to drug plans and manufacturers. Mr. Margulies says those proposals could encourage manufacturers to reduce list prices and drug plans to more aggressively negotiate rebates and discounts. And that's it for today's Daily Medical News. Be sure to listen to our newest episodes of CardioCast and the Post Call podcast. CardioCast and Post Call have new episodes that drop every Friday. For MD Edge, I'm Nick Andrews.
Our stories this week were contributed by Therese Borden, Doug Brunk, Steve Semino, Jeff Craven, Carrie Dooley Young, Randy Dotinga, Sarah Freeman, Alicia Gallegos, Tara Haley, Bruce Jansen, Jim Kling, Kari Oakes, Alexander Otto, Heidi Spleet, Gregory Twachtman, and Mitchell Zoller. Our editors include Terry Rudd, Kathy Scarbeck, Denise Fulton, Therese Borden, Katie Lennon, Glenn Williams, Richard Peasy, Laura Nicolaitis, Catherine Nellist, Jeff Evans, Elizabeth Mechkati, Laura McGlade, Mark Lesney, Gina Henderson, and Catherine Hackett. And I'm Mary Ellen Schneider. If you like what you hear on the Daily Medical News, please leave us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts. And check out the full stories available via the links in the podcast notes. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next week.